This is Ray Stokes in the studios of the Biomedical Communications Department in the TCOM library on May the 8th, 1991. I have a unique assignment today because, as is noted in the records, I'm a former employee of TCOM, having retired last September. I do a little work on the side for the foundation, and I've asked to do an occasional assignment in the oral history section of the Special Collections Department in the library. Today I'm honored because I've known our guest today, at least 14 years or so that she has been an employee at TCOM. And I tell you frankly, the reason why I'm interviewing Dorotha Doane, that's D-O-R-T-H-A, D-O-A-N-E. Is that right, Dorotha?
It's close enough.
Is that close enough? I occasionally visit with Dorotha over at the hospital cafeteria. We don't meet there intentionally, but we meet there occasionally and have lunch together. And here recently, we were discussing a situation that she was interested in, because it so happens that I happen to be a co-author of a recent book called TCOM First 20 Years. And Dorothy got around to reading the book recently, and she made the remark that one statement that one of my interviewees made relative to the first building we had, we called Med Ed 1, which is the 8-story building now on the corner of Camp Bowie and Montgomery. The story goes that they made an overnight move, and Dorotha, who has the title of manager of the property control department here at TCOM, would be the person, if anyone would do any contradicting or saying amen to whatever the statement happens to be, agreeing, then she be the person. Because she said there's one thing about it. There was not an overnight move. It took more than just an overnight move in order to execute all of the transactions. The moving, because we were spread at that time. We were spread, weren't we, Dorothy, in about 3 different locations when we moved into the building.
Yes.
Now then, I've laid the groundwork, Dorothy. I've told what your job is here at TCOM, and it's a very vital and a very important assignment. And you have grown from one to you have a couple of assistants now, and you're in new quarters. So I'd like for you to kind of just talk by giving me some of the experiences that you've had, because I've interviewed better than 40 persons that had something to do with the establishing, the founding, establishing the first years, the first students, and the involvement down through the years. But you have been here since what, 1977?
1977, yes, sir.
And so you've been here almost a 15-year employee. It won't be long, although you weren't here when we were a private. You've been here only since we were state. And of course, at the time you found, I'm sure when you came here to establish your records of inventory and that sort of thing, you didn't have much to, you didn't have many records to find, because we probably were very poor housekeepers in keeping records up till that time. So I know you've done a great deal in building the department and building what we have here on a 16-acre campus. You've done a lot in making that possible as far as keeping records of the control of the properties that we own. So let me have just a little bit background, Dorothy, of where are you from and what's your background? Give a little profile before you came to TCOM.
Before I came to TCOM, I'm a native of Oklahoma.
Native of Oklahoma.
Had taught high school in Oklahoma. Then had gone to Clarendon,
Where
Texas.
in Oklahoma did you teach high school?
At Mountain Park.
Where is that?
That's near Altus.
Near Altus. Okay, I think we can identify Altus.
Broxton, which
Right.
is near Apache, and then Watonga, Oklahoma,
Yeah.
which is near Enid.
Yeah, that's up in north central, isn't it?
Yes, sir. Then I went to Clarendon, Texas for 9 years, where I taught at a junior college.
And that was called Clarendon
Clarendon
Junior?
Junior College. And was there 9 years and then came to Fort Worth
Now,
to take
Clarendon,
on.
what, about 40, 50 miles south of,
About 45 miles south of Amarillo.
Amarillo.
Mhm.
And you were there how long?
9 years.
9 years.
Yes, sir.
Didn't we, in reminiscing on, I know this to be a fact, but we had, I don't know exactly, he was our head accountant here at one time, Bill Hutton.
Bill Hutton was
And-
instrumental in getting me here.
Is that, well, I
Yes.
thought he had some relationship or some,
In his freshman and sophomore years, Bill Hutton had attended college at Clarendon.
yeah, he was a Vietnam
And
veteran, wasn't
That's
he?
correct.
Mhm.
And I had been his accounting teacher at that time.
Uh-huh.
Then he came to
You
Denton.
mean what little accounting, what much accounting he had, he
No,
credit you, huh?
he came on to Denton and did other accounting work there and
I
had a
see.
degree in accounting.
Yeah. He got that from
And,
North Texas, didn't he?
Yes,
North-
and it was through some people at North Texas that he got his position here.
Mm-hmm.
And
I believe John Carter was probably in measure, had something to do
don't
with
remember
it.
the exact names, but I
Well,
would
he was-
suspect
He
that
was vice president of finance up there.
Okay.
I imagine he had something to do with it.
and I was looking for a change in a new position, but I was looking in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Mhm.
Bill became aware that I was looking. He got the word to me that they needed a position, and I said no because I wasn't going south.
You weren't going south of the Red River, were you?
But somehow powers that be talked to me, and I was in Tulsa and making interviews and getting ready to start the third day of interviewing, and the powers that be kept saying, it's down there in Fort Worth, all you have to do is go get it. So I came to Fort Worth and was hired as the property manager at that time.
Well, now, what did you take over? What did you find as property manager?
I took over a desk, a file cabinet, a credenza, a typewriter and a calculator, and records underneath and over the top.
Over the top.
And my job was to first of all get those records straightened out. And once we had done that, we found that the inventory for 1977 had not been done. So that was the next step, was to do an inventory almost the minute I got on campus.
You really got baptized in a hurry then, didn't you?
Yes, because as you said earlier, we were in several different places. All the basic sciences were at North Texas.
Yeah.
And they were in at least 3, and I'm remembering maybe 4 different buildings.
Right.
Every clinic, classroom, and office that we had was on the top floor of any of those buildings. So we started out in what was their public health science, which was 2 flights up, to meet with the people. So I would go in and one instructor would meet me, and we would go down the stairs and across the campus to whatever building he had, and up the stairs 2, 3, and in one building 4 flights, do what we needed to do and come back down the stairs and across the campus and back to the Health Science Center and up the stairs again, and someone else then would say, I know where these things are, and this was repeated daily for about 2 weeks.
Is that right?
I was much thinner then.
Well, was that work, was that kind of coordinated to some degree by Dr. Elizabeth Harris?
No, at
Dr.
that time
Libby,
his
yeah.
Dr. Skinner was our
Oh.
basic dean, and
Well,
so
I
he
was
was
thinking,
the
though,
one
that-
who was officing there. Now, Dr. Harris was one of the people that I worked with because she was chairing a department.
Yeah, and then she was coordinator between TCOM Fort Worth and TCOM North Texas. too.
Yes, and this created some problems because they had both TCOM property and North Texas property, and if it didn't have a tag, you had to be sure that you found the right PO to prove ownership before you could put a tag on it.
Right.
So it was an interesting experience.
All right, then after we did get moved in, whether it was one day or a fortnight into Med-Ed 1, the 8-story building here, what are some of the outstanding memories that you have? In other words, as you kind of go down memory lane, just pick out some of the important occurrences or experiences, usual or unusual?
Well, the moving in overnight, I know many departments moved in as a department overnight, but to fill the full 8 floors was not an overnight move. In fact, the building was not completed when we started moving in.
I was thinking that
We
was
took
true.
the 2 top floors, the 8th floor and the 7th floor, and moved in with all the old furniture because the new furniture was not here yet. And in a couple of weeks, they would finish another floor or the next 2 floors, and it was floor by floor or 2 floors at a time that we moved into Med Ed 1. And so it was not an overnight move to get into Med Ed 1. Now, each department got there maybe overnight, but, but not the whole building. We were in with all the old furniture, and gentleman came to my desk one morning about 8:15 and said, "They're here with the new furniture. Who's counting it in?" Well, we're a new school, remember. We're a new administration. I'm new in a position. Not any of us, I don't think, had ever moved into brand new buildings before.
Right.
So no one had made any plans for this contingency. We knew we were going to have to tag it. We might as well count it. So our first move was to find the purchase orders, so we find out what we were supposed to be counting and how many of it there was, how much there was. We managed to get that done and get some organization to the system, and the old furniture would be moved out and the new furniture put in place.
How much help did you have?
At that time, I had one gentleman, and he worked full-time through the summers and part-time, half-time through the winter. He was a student at the seminary.
I see.
And so we managed to, floor by floor and piece by piece, and as the equipment was brought in, to tag it and count it and attempt to keep records on it. Before anyone else had moved in, I believe the first 8th and 7th floor were occupied, I believe. And while we were moving this new furniture in, there was a smoke problem at the north end of Med Ed 1.
Oh, is this
It was
the story
beginning to-
about the alleged
We
fire?
had a fire and could smell it. We had no smoke alarms, no way to alert people. But it was decided that we probably should evacuate till we found out how bad the problem was. And we went from door to door as we went down the hallway, telling everybody to please evacuate, that there was a fire and that we were going to have
Now,
to
which
get
floor
out.
was this?
The 8th
Eighth
floor.
the top floor.
It's the only time I ever gave the president an instruction, but he followed it. At least I gave it to his secretary and they followed it. But I did get to give the president an instruction once in my life.
What did you say?
I said, "Clear the building, there's a fire."
Clear the building, there's fire.
So we all took the steps and went downstairs.
Do
The
you-
director of
excuse me,
accounting, yes.
Do you remember the date or close?
Don't remember the date exactly, but it was about 3 or 4 months after we had gotten in, I believe. The director of accounting told us after he got out that he had called the fire department, and the fire department said there's no 8-story building on that corner. And he says, "I know there is. I'm on the 8th floor and there's a fire and I'm leaving." They did respond, and we did find...
They didn't have any record of the school at that time.
Well, we had not at that point, I guess, notified them that it was occupied. So they weren't quite ready to come. And we later found that what had happened was one of the men who was helping to move the new furniture in had decided to take a smoke break in the janitor's closet. And either he decided it was time to get out or thought he was going to get caught, and he had flipped his cigarette into the maid's cart, which was full of paper. And of course the maid's cart is cloth.
Yeah.
And that was where the fire had started.
And that was in the days when you could smoke anywhere you wanted to
Yes,
in the building or outside of the building.
Except
which is a
evidently,
no-no now.
except evidently this young man wasn't supposed to be smoking at that time.
No, no, but I mean, you could smoke in the building
Right,
at that time.
we
where
could
now
smoke,
it's a no smoking
it's a no
regulation.
smoking. The other incident was when they let a desk get away from them.
They did what?
Let a desk get away from them. They were in the hallway, and I believe this was on the 8th floor. It slipped. Of course, the east side of the building is all glass. The desk slipped, broke the glass, went tumbling out, and fell 8 floors. No one was injured or damaged in that.
I thought I knew a little about the history, but I hadn't heard about that.
Well, but you see, I was keeping up with this property. That was my job. So I knew those things were happening along the way to the property, because that was one desk we couldn't count.
Did it destroy the desk?
Oh, yes, they had to replace the desk.
My goodness.
But,
now, where did that, what part of the north end or the south end of the building it went out? I'm trying to determine where it landed.
It would have been on the east side.
Yeah, in the
Out
general
onto
parking
what
area.
is now the A lot. But no one was damaged because it fell straight down, and you know, you have that green area and the
Right.
trees there in between, and it just fell straight down. So no one was damaged, and I'm not recalling that any cars were damaged. I don't keep up with personal cars, so I don't.
You don't know, but anyhow,
I knew about the
your
desk.
desk was destroyed.
Yes, sir.
Well, and they had to replace the glass, of course.
Oh, yes. They had to be bonded, so
You know,
those expenses were the mover's expense.
I'm surprised that I thought I knew everything that happened in those early days, but I surely didn't. I had never heard about that.
Well, you were probably on the west side of the building.
Well, no, at that time I was probably still down in what we call the River Plaza
Yes.
before we moved up to the 7th floor.
Right.
At that time. Well, now you've had a lot of experiences, I know, and some are serious and some have been, I'm sure, facetious. But can you? I think you and I recently were discussing some of the experiences you had. Didn't you relate something that Dr. Mary Shunder mentioned one time in her experience? That'd be a good anecdote to tell.
This was when we were officing in the accounting space, room 832. And Dr. Mary Shunder came in one day.
Now, was chairman of the anatomy department.
Chairman of the anatomy department. And she approached the director of accounting and told him that she was not pleased and was not satisfied with her lecturers. Well, the director of accounting responded and said, "But Mary, I don't have anything to do with your lecturers. That's your choice." She says, "But I'm not getting the information from them that I need, that my class needs." He says, "Well, Mary, then you'll just have to select different lecturers. It's not I can't do anything about that." Well, Mary, in her intelligence and wit, kept the director of accounting into this conversation for about 10 minutes. And when she finally let him off the hook, he was on the hook. It seems that the accounting clerks had been coding the cadabras, who are come in with a full name.
Full name. And
they had been coding the cadabras as lecturers. And so Mary thought that her lecturers were not producing as they should.
No, that's a good one. I wish I'd had that story in the book that Dr. Judy and I put together here recently. Well, I'll say, I'd like to say, that's something else I hadn't heard. Of course, I'd interviewed Mary, but Mary didn't tell me that story.
Maybe it wasn't as important to her as it was to us who were listening.
Right.
Because we did get it. The rest of the morning was pleasant because we kept talking about these dead lecturers and whether or not you could get any information from them.
What do you recall any other experience there in Med Ed 1 that was unusual before we moved into Med Ed 2? Anything you can recall?
Nothing other than the constant moving and redeveloping and growing and improving. There
has been quite a growth now in the
definitely
years that you've been there.
Yes.
In other words, now where was you came here in '77, where was your first office?
First office was on the 2nd floor of the old bank building, which was on the corner of University and Bailey.
Yeah.
I think I've moved about at least once every 2 years.
You were never down in
Because-
the River Plaza, were you?
Yes.
Were you?
Not in River Plaza per se.
Oh, you
I
were
was across the
across the
street
street
in what was...
in another bowling alley.
In another bowling alley.
Right.
But we moved from upstairs of the bank building to downstairs of the bank building to the 8th floor of Med Ed 1 and across the hall
Yeah.
and then down to what we called the annex then, which was part of a bowling alley on University.
Across from the River Plaza.
Yes. And finally back to Med Ed 1 again.
And that would, of course, been in 78 or 79?
When we
78.
we moved into Med Ed 1 in about 78 or 79. I think Labor Day.
Yeah, I think
of
Labor Day of 78.
78.
Because they tried to start the fall school year at
Right.
that time.
And it must have been 82 or 83 that we moved down then to the annex. And we were there about 3 or 4 years before we moved back up to Med Ed 1. And now we have a new home in the brand new General
Now, tell us a
Services
little
building.
bit, where is the General Services building as far as the campus is concerned?
The General Services building is on Darcy Street. That's the street that angles from Med Ed 2, the east end of Med Ed 2, and we're about a half a block down Darcy Street on the north side.
That's the street that goes down by the post office?
That's correct. The thing that we're so excited about in this new location is that we have our storeroom immediately next door to us with a window that looks out so that we know what's out there. We can see when something's being taken out. We know when something's coming in.
Quite a bit more visual than it was.
Very much so. As it has been before, we've been as much as 3 miles from the storage area, which could create a great many problems in keeping up with the property that went into and out of storage. And so we're really excited to be officing right next door to the storage area and plan to keep a much better record and rotate the things that go into that area, either through sale if they are not worth redistribution on campus, or redistributing them much faster than we have in the past.
When you say through sale, are you referring to such like an auction procedure that you have occasionally? Give us a
Yes.
little description of the process involved there. When you want to get rid of, if I got a desk I want to get rid of, how do I go about getting rid of it?
Well, if you have a desk you want to get rid of, the first thing we find out is somebody else in that building want it, so we don't have to move it to storage and then back again.
Right.
But if it gets to storage and it is not usable and we're not going to want to put it back into use on campus, once those things accumulate to a certain point, then we will run ads in the newspaper and extend to the public an opportunity to buy any of the surplus property that we have. It's a sealed bid sale.
Sealed bid.
They come in and look it over, put their bids on a sheet of paper, seal them up in an envelope. When we open the bids, then the top bidder gets to take the lot. We usually don't sell just individual items unless it's something rather special or unique. And we usually have rather good success with those.
How about Med Ed 2? What, would you run into any unusual problems when you were furnishing that building?
Med Ed 2, the problem we ran into was...
Now what,
That
Med
the-
Ed 2 is what, is that called the basic science building?
It's the basic science
Okay,
building.
fine.
The first problem we ran into there was that when we looked at the purchase orders, it just said Group 5, so many dollars. Well, that doesn't tell me what's in Group 5. It doesn't tell me how many are in Group 5 or what the unit cost is of Group 5. So we had to go dig some more records.
I see.
And so what we relied on purchasing there, and they provided us with the initial bid sheets and types of items, and to set ourselves up and go in and tag the items in Med Ed 2. That one wasn't as difficult to do as
You'd had a
Med
little
Ed
trial
2.
and
We'd
error
had a little
experience.
practice and knew how to get there.
Right.
And we had also known to be ready ahead of time. So that one wasn't quite as difficult as the others. If there's difficulty with Med Ed 2, it's that the equipment that's in Med Ed 2, not purchased at the time the building was bought necessarily, but it's scientific equipment.
Yeah.
And so one must learn what that equipment does and how many pieces there are to it, and whether those pieces stand alone or not. There is the challenge in tagging the things that go into Med Ed 2.
I see. How about, we're in Med Ed 3 now, aren't we? In the library building and the communications building.
You know, now I swore after we got through with Med Ed 1 that I would not be at TCOM when the other buildings were built.
Oh, you did.
We
didn't you?
have since Med Ed 1 put up 4 buildings. With Med Ed 3, I got a whole new experience.
Tell us about it.
And that was the architects said that we could save money on their fee if someone from the school were to supervise and do a daily check and record of the equipment and furniture that was coming in and out and so on. So for a period of approximately a month, I was in Med Ed 3, watching all the furniture come and go, keeping track of what companies were supposed to deliver on what days, and being sure that they would have access to the dock and the elevator and so on. So I got, first of all, to see it all put in, and then secondly, I got to go back and tag it all. The interesting thing with Med Ed 3 is this was the first time we had done modular furniture with wiring inside the furniture, inside the workstations. And so you might buy the walls and the table unit from one company, the lights from another company, and perhaps an overhead from another company, an overhead storage.
Right.
So our problem there was to be sure that we got all 3 of those purchase orders together, that unit by unit we got all the costs there that should be involved, and we got them all applied to the correct unit. But it was definitely an organization and an accounting challenge to be able to take care of all of that.
Well, what I've been able, of course, I'm hardly a critic one way or the other, but what I've been able to observe, I'd give you an A+ on what you did.
Well, I appreciate that.
Sure would. For example, now we're in a very fine studio here in the biomedical communication section of the library. I guess you had something to do with knowing exactly what all the equipment we have in here in the way of cameras and lights and that sort of thing. You're pretty familiar with them, I imagine.
Yes, and if we're not, we've got the records to
got
prove it.
You got the record to prove it if you're not. Well, that's very good.
But this room itself, much of it was not bought, I mean, the equipment was not bought out of the building fund. The audiovisual people either already had this equipment or bought it out of another fund, so it came in at different orders and different times.
Well, some of this, I'm sure, was transferred from where they were on the 7th floor.
Yes. And at that point, they had to tell us they were moving it.
I understand.
And occasionally things get lost when we do massive moves of that sort.
Can you, without embarrassing any yourself or anyone else as far as that, can you relate any particular item of great consequence that has been lost and hasn't been found, or have you found everything that has been lost?
No, we never find everything that's lost because in some circumstances it wore out and people not realizing that they should contact us have just thrown it in the trash.
I see.
A couple of items that come to mind that we were about ready to write off, because after a period of 4 years, if you don't find it, we write it off as lost. If it shows up, then we can always reclaim it and put it back on the records. But one day, one of the ladies arrived with a projector, overhead projector in hand. We had been looking for it for 3 years. She had borrowed it. They had put it in their garage so it'd be sitting by the car so they could put it in the car when she was coming to work, and something got put in front of it. And when they cleaned the garage, she found it. But she returned it, so we didn't write that one off. The microscope we did write off, but when we closed a satellite program out at the old rehab farm.
That was out Eagle Mountain?
Yes. And they were cleaning some of the closets. This was a rather deep closet, and you know, you never look on the floor at the far back of any closet. But in cleaning that closet, out came this microscope. So we had to write that one, put that one back on inventory. So we don't always find everything.
Well, you've
But
got
we
a
do our
fairly good
best,
record there.
and we have a cooperative group of people on campus who try to help us find these things.
Well, that's good. Do we have very much equipment stolen?
We have a very small amount of equipment stolen, maybe 1 or 2 pieces a year. If we also have a good campus police department.
I was alluding to that, and I wondered.
That one
right.
time, and within the last year, 2 years, last year, I believe, one of our policemen was making his rounds and saw some things in some sacks in the hallway of Med-Ed 1 of Med-Ed 3, level 1 of Med-Ed 3. And didn't think they ought to be there, and when he checked it, it was some audiovisual equipment, quite a lot of it, I understand.
Is that right?
But so he retrieved that equipment and attempted to catch the, I won't call him a gentleman,
Yeah.
the guy who was going to abscond with it. Got a broken nose in the process, but we did get to keep the equipment.
Right.
So we have a good police force who tries to help us with that. We had some problem with typewriters being in open areas for a period of time, and they were quite cooperative in helping to find a means of attaching those permanently to a desk to avoid that sort of thing. So it's a cooperative effort to keep the stolen list down.
Good. Well, Dorotha, we've come through Med-Ed 1, 2, and 3, and possibly, what's the name of the building that you're in now?
General Services
General
building.
Services, and that's down on Darcy Street.
Yes, sir.
Down halfway down the hill.
Halfway down the hill.
Let's see, we've got about a 16-acre spread here now, and I know you've been involved in purchasing and distribution of quite a number of properties, commodities. And I know basically that's your assignment, and that is your number one priority. But I know you have access to the campus. You have access to, since you've been here since 1977, you've seen the identity and the image of TCOM change. Now hopefully it's changed for the better. Do you have any sort of concept about what the identity of the campus was as far as the outsider was concerned in 1977 as compared to what the outsider might think in 1991? And not only the identity, but the image. Do you? In other words, I'm not asking you I'm asking you to level with me on what your impression is. Have we shown a progression to any great extent in these 15 years or almost that you've been here?
I think, from my point of view and from my feeling, yes, we have. It's not easy to count yourself as a sophisticated, well-developed school when you're scattered in leased spaces like an old bank building, and that's the way you're referring to your buildings, as the old bank building, the old bowling alley,
right.
the old motel, and so on. Those do not give a good impression anywhere.
That's right.
And so now that we do have buildings with our name on them, and with names which reflect what we do, then we definitely have a very positive image, much more positive than we would have had 15 years ago. Me relate to you for just a moment. We still have a problem between identifying the school as a school and a separate entity from the hospital, which, though we work very closely with them, is a separate entity. While we were in the process of building MedEd 1, we were also in the process of attempting to buy more land up and down Darcy Street and 7th Street. And this was, probably 3 years, maybe 1980. And I was in what was then a Buddy's grocery store. It's where the old, where the Eckerd's grocery drugstore is now. And the shelves were emptying. There was nothing to buy. And I asked one of the clerks about what was happening, and she said, well, we're closing. The landlords went up on their lease, and they couldn't afford to keep that grocery store there any longer. And it was all because that hospital up there is buying up all the land. Well, they were mixing hospitals again with the school, because number one, the school wasn't buying up all the land, and number two, we weren't going to buy that particular piece of property.
We weren't going that far
Those two
east.
things I knew. But I let her go on with her little feeling of rejection. Maybe I should have said something, but still, it's a question as to whether we are a hospital or a school, and whether or not we are one or two. And that's something we'll probably always have to fight within the community.
Probably will. You probably have the same experience that I used to have. I don't have as much now, since people know I'm retired, but or supposedly retired. But I used to run into people that I knew very well who'd say, Ray, how's everything out at the hospital?
Yes.
And I'd say, well, I guess it's all right, but I don't work for the hospital. Of course, I do now on a volunteer basis occasionally, but I ran into that. Well, Dorothy, another thing that I know you don't come in direct contact as a rule, I don't imagine, with the students, but I know you know some of them, one way or the other. Looking at it from as much of an objective point of view as you can, from the sidelines, what do you think about the student, not necessarily improvement, but the complexities of the student progression down through the years?
Well, you're right. I don't get a lot of contact with the students, and this contact I get with the students is when they are not on guard because they're out in the hallway or they're traveling in the elevator, and they're letting it be known whether they liked that test or didn't, or whether that class was worth the effort, or whether the lecturer, or should we or shouldn't we make the next class, this sort of thing. But I see our student body as being a very intelligent group of people, a very responsible group of people, and dedicated to what they're doing, because they are off guard with a lot of their conversations. And if I just sit in a corner and listen, they also talk about their profession that they're attempting to get into, some of the philosophies that they feel should change or shouldn't, or even some arguments of whether they are yet ready to accept a philosophy. And they do a lot of soul searching.
I see.
Now, they can be like the rest of us if they've just come out of a test, a little loud and a little boisterous and ready to.
I don't know,
but everyone has to play occasionally. But these people that we put through TCOM and that I see in the hallways, when they don't know anybody's really looking, because if they were looking, they would be looking for the president or one of the instructors, and they really don't know that much about who I am. Having worked with college students before, I find them to be a very dedicated group of people.
You know what I was just thinking, Dorotha? I had a finger in the writing of the history of the first 20 years of the school. But from what you've been telling me here today, I think you're qualified to write the first 25 years of the school.
No, I haven't been here that
Well,
long.
I know it, but you will be, I hope.
I haven't been here that long.
I think you will. Anything else that you can recall that's related directly, indirectly with your assignment as manager of the property control department?
Well, we've covered the property angle of it, but a part of the job that we have is to also know all the buildings, know all the measurements of every room in the buildings.
Oh my goodness.
Know who is assigned to those rooms and how they use those rooms, whether it's an office, a storeroom, a classroom, study room.
Right.
And all of that data too is required by the state offices and those reports go to the state office as well as the capital equipment reports that go to the state purchasing agency, which is a state that mandate.
Do you make any any inventory other than an annual inventory?
Of the rooms?
Yes,
We-
property and
We are mandated to do an annual inventory of the property every year. So,
see.
and that date is set by the state legislative body too. So February 28th is our annual inventory day.
February 28th.
Every year.
I see.
You can count on doing inventory starting February 28th until it's finished.
Until it's finished.
There is no mandated deadline on the buildings. So the inventory we usually manage to get out of the way about May. So we try to spend the summer months taking care of the building inventory.
I see.
And we are not a stable institution so far as that this room is going to be here tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Because we grow, it is necessary to reconstruct our buildings so that to account for that growth and make room for that growth. It's just like a house.
Well, that's been
You
visible in
can't-
some of the
yes.
additions around the surgery department, medicine department, and
Yes.
so forth.
You can't put a teenager in the same room that you would put an infant in, so you have to readjust the walls a little. So
Right.
in those cases, we go back and we remeasure the room. And people will laughingly say, how can you lose a room? But you can.
Well, then you were deeply involved in the restoration or the remodeling of the old medical examiner's building, which is now pediatrics, isn't it?
Yes. Now,
You know, I have a kind of a personal interest in that because I feel like I had a little finger in the original purchase or the gift that we got of that building way back in 1973, and it first became an outpatient clinic and then changed to the medical examiner's building, and now it's that they've moved out, it's pediatrics. You were involved in some of that changeover.
well, our involvement comes after they've done the remodeling. Then we go in and measure the rooms and determine who's doing what in what rooms and what kind of a room it is.
I see.
And when I came here originally, that's where Central Clinic was.
Right.
Central Clinic now probably takes up about 3 times the space that we had
And
in
that's
that
in
one
Med Ed
building.
1,
And
isn't it?
yes, Central Clinic's in Med Ed 1.
Uh-huh. Do you have to keep a pretty good record on, like, for example, our outpatient clinics in various areas?
Yes.
What is
Now,
what
we have
relationship
equipment
do you
in-
have with them?
We have equipment in all of those clinics, and since it's leased space, we also have to report that space to the state offices. So all of that gets measured and accounted for. All of the equipment that comes in or out of those clinics is accounted for.
Now, we have a clinic down at Godley,
Yes,
one
sir.
up in Justin.
That's
And
correct.
several in the Fort Worth Metroplex area, I guess, north side and
Yes, sir.
south
And
side.
recently, the one that we've opened out at Carswell. We
Oh,
have
yes.
3 departments now operating out at Carswell
I
Air
just hope it
Base.
stays open.
Oh, I do too, because they're doing us a service and we're doing them a service in that respect. And we've got, I believe, three departments working out there now. So we have equipment out there,
Yeah.
and all of that space is to be measured and
Well,
accounted
now, do you
for.
make an occasional visit to these particular locations?
We try to get to them at least once a year.
I see.
I won't be doing as much of it as I used
No,
to.
you've got a little more help now than you had in the
I
beginning.
have a helper who does
Yeah.
the most of the floor
Right,
work
right.
now, and that's the one thing I dislike about having the helper is I don't get to meet all the people who are out there the way I used to.
I see.
And I enjoyed meeting those people.
Yeah. What else do you reflect that you would change if you could, or improve if you could, or justify if you can?
It would be nice to be a witch and wiggle your nose and have it all in place.
Right.
But then I'm quite sure that all of the administration feel the same way in that respect. It just does take time
Yeah.
that we all learn a little bit of patience
Well,
when
I think
and I'm as guilty as the next person
Well,
with
you
that
may-
lack of patience, believe you me.
you may be guilty of that, but I think TCOM is indebted to you personally for this one, the simple fact that the type of an assignment you have. Now, some jobs can change every 3 months, and there wouldn't be necessarily any great change, any notice. But in your particular job that you have, it's an advantage of TCOM to get for you to acquire all the longevity that you can. I'm sure.
Well, I appreciate
I'm
that.
being selfish as far as the school's concerned in saying that, but as long as it doesn't hinder your progress in any way, I know that the school looks forward for your association for years to come.
Well, and a great deal of the success that we have in property control is the result of the people that are on campus, the faculty, the staff, the administration, everyone, physical plant, janitors, everyone. Because when we go out to do an inventory, without their cooperation, we could not succeed. If they were not keeping us notified of when they move the equipment and what's happening to it, we could not succeed. It truly is a situation where if you don't have the cooperation, you can't do the job. And the people here are very cooperative, exceedingly cooperative. So it helps to make the job pleasant.
You mentioned to me earlier that you're going to have an open house in your new facilities. You know what the date is on that?
The date of the open house will be March the 28th, I believe.
March the 28th. That's next March. Open house?
Excuse me, May the 28th.
Oh, well, I wondered.
I'm still doing
well,
inventory.
Well, I understand. Well,
May the
when
28th.
we opened the library had been in function for nearly 2 years when they had the opening ceremony. So I wasn't at all surprised when you said March
No,
instead of May.
May the 28th.
May the 28th. That's just a little over a month and a half from now. Well, I have a suggestion for whoever plans the program for that day. And I'm not trying to be facetious, but I think the general employee of TCOM ought to know a little bit more about your assignment, what you're charged with, and what is required of you, and what's required of your department as a comparison with other departments and so forth, of the cooperation. It wouldn't be a bad idea, Dorothy, if they showed a copy of this videotape during that particular
Oh,
time.
I'm not sure that anyone would want to.
You don't think they would?
But we do our fair
have-
share of advertising to let everybody know we're there and that we need
you
them.
You might talk them into indoctrinating, as they indoctrinate the new employees, to show excerpts of this particular interview. For new employees might get some benefit out of the information that you've given today. Well, Dorothy, we're very grateful to you. And as a ex-employee, I'm grateful for the opportunity to get to come back and feel at home, so to speak, and to visit with you and to you've given me an update on some of the things that you're doing, and we're grateful. And in behalf of the library and the Biomedical Communications Department, we say thank you.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed doing it.